and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Today, I am so unbelievably excited to have the incredible Jennifer Brown on the show. Jennifer is an award-winning entrepreneur and owner of the strategic leadership and organizational management firm, Jennifer Brown Consulting. As a leading diversity and inclusion expert, speaker, and social equality advocate, Jennifer's workplace strategies have been employed by some of the world's top Fortune 500 companies and nonprofits to help employees really bring their full selves to work. Jennifer's groundbreaking work in talent management, human capital, and intersectionality theory have redefined the boundaries of talent potential and company culture. Jennifer founded JCB in 2006 to bring her successful strategies in consultative training and thought leadership to the C-suite. Her and her team have since facilitated hundreds and thousands of leaders all over the world on critical issues, including issues of strategy, leadership, and integrity. And today, her focus is on identifying the emerging workplaces, their trends, and building more enlightened and inclusive organizations with client work and outreach where all kinds of talent can feel valued, welcomed, respected, and heard. Jennifer is a massive shero of mine, and I have to say I'm a bit of a girl fan here, sitting here with her on the Zoom today. So I'm so delighted to welcome her to the show. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Leila. I'm so happy to be here.
It's an honor and a privilege to have you on the show. Least of all, because I must have read your book numerous times, your inclusion book on diversity, the new workplace and the will to change. But I'm also an advocate and I'm a listener as well of your podcast series, which is absolutely fantastic. And now that I'm writing my own book, I really would love to feature you in that as well with some of your quotes. And so, yeah, I just can't wait for all of our listeners to hear.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, everything that you have to say. So tell me, in a nutshell, for those that may not know you or for those who already are fans like I am, tell me a little bit about what you've been up to recently, some of the current projects, some of the current pieces that you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. What am I doing? Well, I am looking forward to the release of my second book, which is in August of 2019. So that's really exciting.
Brilliant.
It's entitled How to Be an Inclusive Leader, Your Role. So it's about your role in creating cultures of inclusion and belonging where everyone can thrive. So it's going to be my attempt to lay out a process and a plan with concrete actions that everyone can take to get involved in diversity and inclusion and to take action. Because what I'm hearing a lot is folks are like, okay, I get the why. I understand why this is important, but what do I now do? And I'm grateful for that opening, for that opportunity. I think we were stuck on the why for a long time, and some people still are. But I'm so gratified to see that people say, okay, I get it. And I want to be a more inclusive leader. My company's asking me to be. I've sort of opted out in the past or not done as much as I could be doing. You know, maybe this book will help give me some ideas and some frameworks to utilize. It's just like building a muscle. You know, it takes daily application. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes that muscle is sore or you push yourself really hard and you sort of have to deal with the aftermath. But ultimately you build strength. And that's honestly what inclusive leadership, that's the process. You know, it's not an overnight thing. But it is a discipline and it has highs and lows and easy parts and difficult parts. But ultimately what matters most is that you're on the journey and that you're trying. And I think that's what I'd like to see more people doing and help them along that journey.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm so excited that you've got another book out. That's fantastic news. I completely agree with you on the fact that it is a journey. I mean, I spend, much of my time in boardrooms in the UK talking about diversity and inclusion. And, I think often there's that kind of, there's almost a bit of a diversity fatigue sometimes. I think people are like, oh my goodness, okay, diversity again. Where are we up to with it? They're all at different stages of the journey, as you say. And so it's really about embracing where they're at and help leveraging that further and making it even more positive as opposed to criticizing where they might not be right now, because I think there is a bit of shame within organizations that perhaps they should be much further forward than they are. But just taking things back.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just taking things back a few notches, I know all about your background and your personal story, which I think is just so incredibly heartwarming. I wondered whether, and I know you've repeated it numerous times, but I wondered whether you might be able to just give us a quick kind of synopsis about your personal background and how you came to be where you are today as, you know, an LGBTQ plus woman within leadership, as a very, very valued and respected and cherished thought leader. Could you tell us how you came to find yourself in that position and some of the early day struggles that you encountered?
Certainly. Yeah, it is a story I tell a lot as an opening to my keynote. In a short version of it, it is that I had the good fortune of studying to be an opera singer and coming to New York, which is like every person's dream that wants to do that. And then through the course of my vocal training, I ended up injuring my voice. I guess my instrument is not very strong and resilient. And I ended up having to have several vocal surgeries. And I often talk about how the aftermath from that is total silence, doctor's orders. And then when you're able to make a sound, all that comes out is a tiny squeak. So I worked really diligently to bring my voice back, but I would come to realize that my instrument would be forever compromised, as I say. And I needed to reinvent. And I really credit actually the time on stage that I spent my whole life performing, that it enabled me to land on my feet and be resilient and reinvent. And be sort of present to what the universe wanted me to do next. And where it led me to is actually a lot of people who perform make really wonderful trainers. So we're obviously good in front of audiences, but I didn't know that field existed. And so I pursued that and followed a lot of advice and mentorship by ex-stage performers. And I ended up becoming a corporate trainer and teaching everything under the sun, all of what we call the soft skills catalog. And really, after a while, developing a point of view about what was broken in the workplace. Because when you spend that much time with managers and leaders in classrooms at all different companies and all different industries, you hear the same things repeating over and over. You wonder why people are disengaged. You know, you hear how cynical they are about leadership and their employer. And then you start to, when you layer on the diversity issues, then that you start to see things through that prism as well. It became something I thought, you know, maybe I could be a voice to shift the conversation about what's important at work, who's not being heard, how leadership isn't really fulfilling its real duty to increase employee engagement, which we know that number is really depressing. And all you need to do is look at Gallup. Every single year they release employee engagement statistics, and you know it's kind of rock bottom for a lot of companies. So I moved from being a trainer to then having my own company and starting to have big Fortune 500 companies. I got a lot of clients, which was exciting. And now I get to work with executive level of Fortune 50 companies, my team and I, every day. And we get to focus on diversity and inclusion. And I get to bring my LGBT identity into the frame, not only just as an ancillary thing, but honestly as something that shaped the experience of being on the outside, really shaped me, and has allowed me to develop resilience and creativity and emotional intelligence, because not knowing whether somebody's going to be comfortable with you or not has a lot to do with whether they're going to listen to you, give you credibility, consider your advice as a consultant or as an expert or a thought leader. So it's been really, I think the timing has been good, although I couldn't have planned it that way. Mm-hmm. I've got to be myself, and it's really important to make sure I'm showing up fully authentically as a consultant, standing in front of people, even if that kind of challenges their stereotypes, and perhaps especially if it challenges their stereotypes. And I think it makes me a much better consultant. And knowing how the LGBTQ community has fought for workplace equality is really an interesting lesson, because it's been very strategic, very business oriented. And I've really taken a page from that. And that is kind of how we talk about the business value of diverse talent in your organization today. Really, it was very formative for me and for the larger conversation. So I think we all have this opportunity now to make the business case for ourselves and for how our companies should really be embracing us and changing in order to be a place where we can thrive and not just hide, which is still happening to a great degree.
Absolutely. That's so fascinating. And what I love in some of your stories, and I really wanted to ask you about some of the most challenging times that you've experienced, because in your book and in your podcasts and in the YouTube pieces that I've watched and the TED Talks and everything else that you've done, you've just told these really wonderful, authentic, kind of heartfelt stories about how you struggled to fit in as an LGBTQ plus woman, and that you kind of then you had this moment where you went into your, I think it was your boss's office at the time, and then just kind of burst into tears and said, right, this is who I am. And I just love how you're willing to literally almost put all of yourself onto this slate, because it's quite a vulnerable place to be. And I really wanted to ask you more about how you managed to get through these challenging times, and especially for our listeners who are tuning in today, who are maybe experiencing some of these kind of struggles, or they wish they could be like I do, where you are really established in this kind of wonderful C-suite career that you're in right now. Obviously it's not all been swings and roses and petals and roundabouts. How did you get through these challenging times, and are there any pieces that you can share with us?
Certainly, I have a lot of ideas. Remembering that you're never alone, remembering that your experience is not unique to you, and that we now have a lot of data and research around how women feel in the workplace, how women of color in sort of a different way feel in the workplace, right? So it's really important for us to know, if for your female listeners and for your male listeners as well, that depending on people's diversity dimensions, they may be dealing with more or less difficulty, what I would call headwinds, in the workplace on a day-to-day basis. So when you're a colleague for someone, or a peer of theirs, or a mentor, or a boss, or a manager, or work for someone, it's very important for us to know enough about the research out there to know how somebody may be struggling with being fully accepted, with the things that they hear on a day-to-day basis that go unchecked. For example, casual comments, what we might call microaggressions, which is those little things that you hear that leave you wondering, that didn't feel so great. Wonder why they said that. I wonder why I wasn't invited to that meeting. I wonder why I got that feedback. It's important to understand, particularly for people of any kind of privileged identities. It's really critical to know it may be an easier road for me, and it may be a more difficult road for others. So what does that mean in terms of the need for me to be an inclusive leader, and understand other people's experience that may be different from mine? So that's become a drumbeat for me in my work. And when I stand on stage, I always think it actually, you said what sort of restores me. I think that when I think about my kinds of privilege that I have, I think that's something that I can do something with, that while I may be female and LGBTQ and I need allyship, I need those who will speak sometimes for me, alongside me, give me strength, protect me, intervene, remove obstacles that may be occurring. I can also do that for others based on certain identities that I have that enable me to tell the truth more often, to have bold conversations, to intervene on someone else's behalf. So it's a really interesting place where I have a little bit of all of these things. And my argument these days is we all do. We all have levels of privilege and ways we can be using our voices. And we, at the same time, as we may need the support of others who could be using something that they have on our behalf. So I think it's a different way of talking about this, because I think we've assumed they're like, I laugh, but we say, well, that's a diverse person, and then some other people say, well, I'm not diverse. So like, what would I know about this? And I think we have to, it's never been true. Some of us have visible diversities, some of our diversities, many of our diversities are invisible. And every day we might choose to cover those aspects of who we are. We may reveal them. If we trust our environment, if we trust our colleagues. And, we really want to get to a place where we can all be seen and heard, and that we can all think about how has exclusion felt in my life? How have I felt that there's something I can't bring to the table when I try to bring my full self to work? And how is that impacting my potential, my ability to contribute? And really like looking at that and challenging ourselves to be uncomfortable, because all growth happens when we are uncomfortable. And a lot of what I talk about is kind of that momentary discomfort to say, what gets in my way of bringing my full self to work? What gets in others' way? How can I extend myself to ameliorate that for someone else? And also, how can I use my voice more boldly? Because when I stand up on stage and come out every single time, it's sometimes uncomfortable for me, particularly in front of 1,000 people, say, or a mostly male audience, which is a common thing for me. I feel very vulnerable in those moments, but I say to myself, it's really critical for me to show myself, because it may shine a light on somebody else's experience that's not able to use their voice like I do and like I can. So for that momentary discomfort for me, it could provide literally a life-saving beacon for someone else who's very much struggling with who they are and feelings of acceptance, so that they can thrive as well. So when in doubt, surround yourself with your community. Remember, like, you're not alone. There's others that are experiencing this. Take solace in that. Make sure you spend time there. But also then use your voice for others. When in doubt, be generous. Figure out what you can do, even if it's a small gesture. And then remember that this is not just about you, but it's honestly about all those who are watching you and watching all of us for signals around whether they are accepted or not. Because, that to me, that gets me out of bed in the morning, and like, regardless of how I'm feeling or how maybe small or big I'm feeling that day, it must be done, because we've got to change what people see as what a leader looks like. And so that's incumbent on all of us to make sure that we share that.
That was so wonderfully and articulately put. I just love that. And this is what I love, for all of our listeners out there. This is what I love about Jennifer. She's so willing to kind of put herself out there into this vulnerable place, even if it means just one person feels comfort, or one person feels like, oh my goodness, now I've got the confidence to do that. And that's what I think is so great about you. And you're completely right there. For those who are listening who maybe have got struggles or are having a hard time at work, you really aren't alone. And I think actually, as Jennifer has alluded to here, everyone can be a role model. Every single person out there has got the ability to be able to speak up, whether it's uncomfortable, whether it's something unusual, or they feel other people have not heard that before, that they can be a role model. Because if just one person hears their voice on a podcast or in a blog or on a LinkedIn post or in a book, then actually it can inspire and resonate with just one or two people. Well, that's one or two people that can then go on and do the same. And then it's another one or two people. And before you know it, actually, we've got this really fantastic movement where there is positive change happening. And Jennifer, you talked about, I know that you stand on stage and you speak in front of lots and lots of people and lots of big corporates. How have you found the reception, generally speaking, to you almost having to go through this uncomfortable coming out phase every single time? Is that, do you ever get used to that, or is it always this feeling of kind of, heart in the chest, I've got to then say it? And what are the kind of reactions that you've had? Because I bet you've had some really interesting reactions over the years, haven't you?
I do. I mean, I think telling our stories, it gets easier over time. And that, I think, is part of the healing. So for me, it's cathartic. And I think every single time your story becomes your tool, really. So it's not so vulnerable. It's not so much like you have to go back through it every single time. You become, in a way, the master of the story. Like, it's something that you use intentionally, and it does elicit interesting reactions. As well as actually my opera story. I walk on stage and play myself singing with orchestra, and nobody thinks it's me. And then my very first thing I say is that the voice that you just heard was mine, and I take a curtsy on stage, and people think, that's not what I thought an opera singer looks like. So she's so small. How did she make that noise? So that's the first surprise. And then, coming out is the second surprise. And then actually the surprises keep coming. I mean, I literally say, and, I walked on the stage, and you might have thought to yourself, this is our diversity speaker, and I say, well, what does a diverse person look like? What does an expert look like in this space? You know, you might have thought, I'm a white woman. Like, what do I have to say about this topic? So I think it's, as a speaker, you keep the surprises coming. You keep that, what I call cognitive dissonance going.
Mm-hmm.
And those are those really great moments where people are challenged with their own biases, particularly when I come out, I know what's going through people's heads. And sometimes it gets very quiet in the room, but I can feel everyone is kind of hanging on in the moment, which is actually a really cool feeling, because that's power. Like, in the most wonderful, generous sense, that is power to take the conversation then when people's minds are open and they're realizing, whoa, like, she knows something I don't know. Like, she just totally fooled me. Like, I just walked right into that. So they will go with you after you create that kind of moment. Then I feel like people are just going with you, and you could do whatever you want with like thousands of people, which is super fun. It's really it's really fun. They'll do whatever I ask them to do. And I think the other thing is, you know, sharing very vulnerably gives other people permission to do the same. So as I quickly go through that first like 10 to 20 minutes of my talk, by the time I unleash them at their table group so that they can discuss and share some similar things, the room just erupts. I mean, I interpret this as people are dying to be given permission to talk about something that's most important to them, that they struggle with when they think about bringing their full selves to work, and to turn to a colleague and in many cases verbalize something for the first time to a total stranger. They are completely willing to do that. And it's just incredible to see. There has never been a moment when it hasn't happened. And so I'm at the point now where I can predict that all of this is going to happen, and everyone's going to like jump through and walk through that door and trust each other and do, as I shared my example, they are now doing theirs. And it's this really deep transformative moment. And sometimes we'll pass the mic afterwards. People will stand up and share what they heard or what they shared for the first time and how it impacts them. So anyway, I just think it's another reminder that we set a tone for an environment around us of safety or not. But if we do that and we go first, often people will follow suit. And this is why when I work with leaders about being vulnerable, which by the way, none of them want to be, because that is definitely it's not the, right? Not executive leadership image. And I try to challenge that. And I say, particularly the younger generations want to see the whole leader. They crave humanity and imperfection and authenticity. And by authenticity, we mean you don't know the answers to everything. You aren't this unassailable leader with no struggles or challenges. But many executive leaders don't. They have these stories, but they never talk about them. And so, I have a little kitty behind me.
Oh,
they don't really talk about them. So he's cute. So part of the goal, the growth for executive leaders, particularly because executive leaders are often straight white men, and this is just a fact in the corporate world, many of us look at them and say, oh, they don't understand diversity. They don't have a diversity story. They, what are they, how could they possibly have anything in common with me? But I know through working with many of them that there are many things they're not talking about that could really, again, like shine that beacon for others. And they have so much power. I mean, they have like the potential to create exponential awareness and change and bravery in their organizations, but they need to show that first. So it's a really interesting time for I sort of this like fundamental redefinition of leadership to be inclusive. But it's like I say to them, you can't expect others to be forthcoming about their own diversity stories without you doing the same. And so let's talk about your story. That's always that's all. I usually can find something. There's seldom an individual that I've ever met that at some point doesn't realize, I do know something about this. I may not have had the same degree of challenges as others, but there is a story that I can share that feels vulnerable to me, and that I hope will send a signal that I, as an executive leader, might understand a small piece of where people are coming from. So I think if we could achieve that would be world changing.
Absolutely. And it's so funny that you talk about the fact that there needs to be almost this redefining leadership piece, because you're quite right. It is just a fact. There's 7 female CEOs in the FTSE 350 in the UK, which is just crazy. And I mean, you're right on everything that you said. That there's so many things that I could say in response. I agree on the fact that millennials, and as a millennial, I absolutely do see others who want to see humanity in their leaders. They want to see the full package. They want to see the warts and all, as we would say in the UK, what they look like, not just the, and disclaimer here, because this is just a fact, is that the middle-aged white male in his suit, who is your stereotypical leader, who is on the front page of the Financial Times, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But they absolutely do need, in my opinion, to be embracing some of their personal stories and sharing with the wider public and with their future leaders exactly who they are deep down, and not just the surface level persona that we see by reading a news article or watching TV. I really do think, as you've said in this redefining leadership piece, is that there is a huge evolving movement now happening between the leader of yesteryear and the leader in position of power right now, through to the millennial and zillennial leader that is starting to come up through the ranks, wanting to see every single facet. And to your point on everyone having a diversity story, again, completely concur with that. And you say that in your podcast, which is lovely, is that every person out there has got a diversity story. And I've repeated your words back actually when I've been in meetings before, because I'll often be sitting there with, middle-aged white male business leader, and they'll say, well, Leila, what can I talk about when it comes to diversity? And it's like, no, we want to convert you into believing that diversity and inclusion is great, because actually it could be, a room full of Chinese girls or a room full of black guys, and then there would be maybe a couple of white individuals in the room. It's not just race. It's about a mindset piece. Diversity is really that difference of mindset and preventing groupthink. And so actually all of you have got something to say, and we must not judge by stereotypes, because there could be 20 middle-aged white male leaders in a room, and actually they're all very diverse in their thinking. So, it's really taking the time and effort to uncover the diversity story, as you say in your podcasts, to really understand and find out what people are all about. And that definitely starts with the personal stories. It definitely starts with the vulnerability. And, I must ask your advice off air, actually, about your thoughts on this TV show that we're trying to curate at the moment, its working title is The Enlightened CEO. And we want to take 15 CEOs, listed Fortune 500 or FTSE CEOs, of which we have 2 willing participants signed up already, on a journey of enlightenment and learning through all the different lenses of diversity and inclusion, through disability, through to different cultures, through to taking them out on a monastery and have them live life as a monk for a couple of days to really get them back to humanity. And I tried to talk to people about this, and they're like, wow, that's ambitious. But I was thinking, God, it'd be great to ask your opinion, or maybe even have you on the docu-series as an expert in diversity, uncovering some of their, psychological idiosyncrasies and what have you, to really, really help shape and make the world a better place. Because if we, not just millennials and zillennials and business leaders in general, were to see them in a slightly different light, I think that the world and business could be a much better place, because it's not just about profit, it's about putting purpose and passion before that, and shining a light on these kinds of aspects, which I really think will be game changing.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. When you say enlightened CEO, it's not just around inclusion. It's making those values public outside of the 4 walls of the company. So I look a lot at corporate social responsibility. For example, how is the company ethically involved in the world? And how is the CEO, and even particularly if it is perhaps a straight white male CEO, which so many of them are, as you just said, the vast majority are, they can control, maybe they can't control how they look, but they can control what they speak about. They can control how they elevate certain issues that are happening in society or in their workforce. They can sort of be propagating a message and showing their commitment as leaders in the form of really concrete actions as a company in terms of how they make the world a better place. In the US, this takes the form of companies taking a stand on equality, actually. So, We have some CEOs who are very, very committed to LGBTQ rights in a certain state where they may have thousands of employees, but the state has some laws on the books that are discriminatory. So the CEO will literally take that up with the local politicians or the government and say, hey, do you want our business? Because here's what we believe in terms of protecting and supporting all of our employees so that they can thrive. But when we do business in a state where they aren't protected the second that they walk into a shop and their rights aren't protected, in terms of literally, who will serve them in a customer service respect, we have a choice about where we can put our huge new headquarters, and so it's really exciting to see some CEOs, not many, but some taking a stand, publicly declaring that they agree or don't agree with something that has occurred, related to, for example, white supremacy, which we're very much struggling with in the U.S. Employees of color and white employees as well, of course, who consider themselves to be allies. We all crave hearing what our company, and particularly our CEO, believes about what's right and wrong. And we interpret that as, am I going to be supported here at this company? Am I, on a very personal level, I and what I care about, is that going to be paid attention to, represented, talked about? Because I always say silence speaks volumes, right? And I think that our employees are looking to leadership to say, do you see me? Do you care about me and what's impacting me outside of the workplace? Because let's face it, when I come into work Monday morning, I'm bringing all of that with me. I'm bringing whatever happened over the weekend that, distressed me and hurt my community. And I'm going to be distracted and I'm going to be not able to do my best work. But if I have to sort of stuff it down and kind of get on with it, and nobody's talking about it also, I think we really, really, that's what breaks, I think, the trust between employees and their employer, when they just don't feel seen as full humans and our experience is not acknowledged or talked about. So I do think this sort of resonant CEO, someone who really thinks about, how can I authentically celebrate each community of all descriptions, of all kinds of diversity in my workforce? How can I make them feel that they're important here, and that all of who you are is important here, and that this company aligns with your values, and we want you to know we care about what you care about in the world, and we want to say that publicly. I think I predict many more U.S. companies. I'm not sure about international, because the issues are so different around the world, but I do know that in the U.S., this is starting to become a real benchmark for desirable employers to work for. I think that younger workforce in particular is looking for that values alignment. They're looking for the visible emphasis on inclusion. And that means, it does cross over into the political realm, the socioeconomic realm, and I think this is a great opportunity to get comfortable with this new, very transparent, very accountable world that we live in, where our employees are like, no, I refuse to come to work and be somebody else and then leave and have the rest of my life. That I want this all to be sort of all of one piece, right? And so it's really exciting. I thought my generation, which is Generation X, we didn't really fight for this. We were a very small generation comparatively, but we also just didn't have the voice. We didn't have the confidence. I think we were very disaffected. And it just wasn't time, socially, for us to be able to have that power. But what the power is of millennials and Generation Z coming in to shape their workplaces according to what their values are, and thankfully one of their top values is inclusiveness, it's really going to create a sea change. So I often think, I'm like, well, like maybe the demographic shift will like do all the work that I've been working so hard to do person by person. And, like the starfish, like walking along the beach, tossing each one painstakingly back into the water so that they might have a chance to live. That's been really hard work for a lot of us in these older generations who are trying to pull organizations to this conversation and getting so much kicking and screaming and resistance, like just, or apathy, or just a total lack of urgency. I do see that changing, and I think they're feeling the heat. I think they're feeling the heat of demographic changes, both in their employee base and also honestly in their customer base, which is becoming way more diverse, and the buying power of whether it's the Black dollar, the gay dollar, the Asian dollar, female, decision makers on spending, all of those groups are the fastest growing groups in terms of customers and consumers. So I feel like the writing is completely on the wall. So whether people choose to pay attention to this and get ahead of it, or whether they are the victim of it, I think is a very important threshold choice for executives and for companies these days.
Absolutely. I think you've raised some super valuable points there. And I feel your pain and your passion with everything that you've been through. I really do. And I do think that there is a big wave of the movement. I think it's been, for individuals like yourself and beyond who have really put a stake in the stand and said, right, this is it, something has got to change. And individuals like, myself and my generation have looked up to people like you and said, right, do you know what? We are really going to jump on this already moving bandwagon, because right now, like you said in our earlier conversation, is there's so much data and research and all the McKinsey reports that have proven now that, there really is a business impact. This is not just a nice pink and fluffy, lovely to have. This is actually business critical. It is something that must exist. Like my dream in the world is, firstly, obviously to make a better place, but also to hope that diversity and inclusion is not a thing. It's just that actually this is how we exist, and we don't have to be on this constant tiring drum about it all the time. So I think that first of all, you've just done such an amazing job, and second of all, I hope that I can continue along with my other peers and friends and colleagues alike to continue on all of the great work that the world is starting to do in D&I, because I do think, it's still not enough. And, even though all the data might be there, we really need to, and this is our strapline actually for the new business, DAR Global, which stands for Diverse, Inclusive, Aspirational Leaders Global, is that we need to win hearts and minds with purpose and action. And so we're getting businesses to sign up to signatories to the code, because businesses and governments are now saying there should be, it should be set out that there is a purpose and what is a business's purpose and all this kind of stuff. And so actually having something which is measurable, where we can actually physically move the dial, is really going to make a significant difference, because not enough is happening. And we can talk and talk and talk about it, but we really need to actually inspire that action somehow.
Well said.
Sorry, totally going off on board there.
Okay.
But I'd really love just to ask you a couple of quick questions. I'll call it a lightning round just before we wrap up for today, because I really want to I've written reams of notes here, and I'd love to just summarize some of the key learning pieces for all of our listeners at home. But I've got a couple of quick lightning round questions that I'd love to ask, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to answer each of them. Who has been your biggest inspiration in your career or in life?
In my career, and as I am a practitioner, I'm always looking at leadership, like we've been talking about. I really like the CEO of Salesforce, Mark Benioff, and a couple other female CEOs as well, who are really, really showing, I think, their heart in their leadership and weighing in on social issues that impact employees and the world, and trying to use the power of private enterprise to change outcomes. Bill and Melinda Gates, et cetera. I think being a female CEO in particular at that level, I really admire, and I know how difficult it's been to achieve those levels and everything that they've gone through. So I do think a lot about what a previous generation, and even my generation, has broken through, and what they've put up with, what they've become resilient and stuck in there in order to be role models for so many others that are looking upwards and saying, can I see it? If I can see it, I can be it. But that requires that particularly women and female leaders have stuck in there and hung in there through so much difficulty and obstacles to be the first. So anyone that's been that first is an inspiration to me, because I believe many others are watching them, and we need to use them, talk about them a lot, so that people understand, like, here's what this looks like, and you can be this someday. And so anyone who's like a first in any field and at that level, I really, it gives me hope that there's more behind them that are being created, even though progress is a little too slow for my taste.
Fantastic. And what advice might you give to the young Jennifer, your younger self?
My younger self. As a business owner, I've had my own business for, 12 or 13 years now. I don't think that I trusted my voice and really understood what I was actually building and the importance of what I was building. And it took me a long time and hiring certain folks and who like didn't want me to have my voice, or I sort of put myself in the background and instead of in the front. And so I think we do evolve to claim our platform and our voice and our approach. And so for me, I was never the person that sort of emerged fully formed and fully confident and crisp in everything that I wanted to create. It was absolutely an evolution. So if I knew then what I know now, I would know that I am onto something incredibly important and that I would play a really important role in shifting the dialogue about all of these things. And who knew, like writing books and informing the conversation and stretching people's understanding and impacting thousands of people. So I don't think we know these things when we're first starting. And particularly, I think as women, and you can add women of diverse identities, non-white identities, or LGBTQ women, or women with disabilities, veteran women, or a combination thereof. Because we can't see it, I think we do play smaller for longer until we can kind of find our voice and really trust that. And so that's part of what I wish I had understood at an earlier point, like what my potential really was and how urgent it was to really get out there, start using my voice, trust my gut, feel that I had enough, both knowledge and value and wisdom to impart. Because God knows, I think, men start companies and probably view this very differently. I think probably if I could grossly stereotype, it's one of the biggest issues, I think, because I see men, jumping out there, writing books, having podcasts, keynoting, asking for a lot of money. The way they navigate their career is really fundamentally very different than how women do. And not to say we need to clone ourselves. I would never say that, but I have learned a lot about watching how the other gender navigates themselves, markets the environment, the landscape, kind of emerges with this confidence that I would wish for more women, and particularly for women entrepreneurs and younger and career professionals. So own your power, trust your gut, use your voice, don't wait for permission, charge a lot for what you do. Really just think about if you need to channel somebody else who's really, really confident and maybe doesn't have the goods to back it up, channel them, do whatever you need to do.
Fantastic. And I mean, I guess that's a really great point to summarize what a fabulous podcast there's been. And truly, Jennifer, thank you so much for sparing the time to come on the show with me today. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait for all of our listeners to hear you on the podcast, which is available on Apple or any of the other popular podcast apps that you can get, or on YouTube. So I'm going to summarize quickly from today, and I've written reams and reams here, so I don't really know where to start with my summary. But to leave off on the last piece that Jennifer so articulately said is really find your own power. Try not to be scared. I love the piece that you said about the fact that silence really does speak volumes. I think that is so incredibly true. So please, if you're listening, all of you out there, do try and find your inner voice and try and get that out to the forefront. If it means talking to a couple of people at work or a couple of friends outside of work, please do that. And please do try and share some of your unique traits, characteristics, some of your unique stories. Perhaps even try an exercise where you make a new friend at work and you talk to them about one of your personal stories that you might not have otherwise shared. Because I'm sure that you'll find from that sharing, you'll get so much back. And perhaps that person will then share with you their personal experiences. It could be a brand new relationship that has been forged. So please don't suffer in silence. Please don't be alone. If you're struggling in your career, or if you're struggling with, any aspect of D&I, whether it be, coming out or bringing your authentic self to work, please do just try and speak to someone. And also feel free to get in touch with Jennifer or myself. You can get in touch with Jennifer online with her Jennifer Brown Consulting business. I know that her or one of the team would be delighted to hear from you. You can also get in touch with her on LinkedIn. You can see all of the show notes as well, which will be at the end of today's episode, all in and on my website, which is www.leilamckenzie.com/podcasts. The podcast will also be available on YouTube, it'll be on Apple, and it will be on our new website, which will be launched very soon, www.dialglobal.org/podcasts. But please do reach out. Don't be a stranger. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much as well, Jennifer, for being on the show. You're an inspiration.
Thanks, Leila. No, you are too. Keep up all the good work.
Thank you so much. And look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes, I can't wait.
Bye for now. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.